Very pleased to be joined here at Blog of the Boys by the one and only, the legendary Mr. Fantastic himself, Pedro Pascal. Eat your heart out. It's very difficult to say. I've been trying for it's been year and a half. DLLS. I always forget the second L. Dallas Sports. Joe Hoyt. That is very easy to say, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, RJ, it's something that I'm even still trying to figure out. I think it's such a tongue twister having the two L's back to each other. Yeah. But eventually maybe I'll get it. But hey, man, thanks for having me on.
On the subject of I guess brain twister type things like DLLS sports, did you see what Ryan Flournoy? We're recording this on Tuesday, June 17th, and it's dropping on Monday, June 23rd. But did you see what Ryan Flournoy posted on his Instagram on Monday, June 16th?
I did not, no.
So he wants to. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, wants to get a tattoo. Fine. I've got no issues with that. And I'm assuming that this is what he wants. Now, it's an image. I'm going to show it to you here. And he said, "Who can make this tattoo for me?" Dallas area. So obviously, local things, if anyone can help him. But if you can see, he's using the N from the NFL logo for Ryan and the FL for Florida. Do you get what he did here? Like the Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a little going like this right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder who the first person was that was like, "Dude, check it out. I've got this idea for you."
Oh, no, 100%. This is like something that either it came to him like as he's about to fall asleep and he like woke up in a stir and he's like, "Oh, I need to write this down." We got the NFL, or someone's like, "Bro, did you ever realize Ryan NFL Flournoy?"
Yeah.
Could it be? Could it be? I don't know. So, okay, good for him though, man.
You are a bit newer on the scene, couple years obviously going now. Do you remember Anthony Brown, or did you ever see Anthony Brown's tattoo that he had for the Cowboys?
I've heard about it, yeah.
Yeah, that was a special time, to say the least. For anyone who doesn't know, who isn't as seasoned as Joe, Joe's incredible. Everybody follow him and his work that he does covering the Cowboys. He's awesome. It was a potato chip on his shoulder with 189, because he was the 189th overall pick in the NFL draft. And I mean, I can respect the intention behind it, but that's one of those, like, the idea sounds great when you're sitting on your buddy's couch at 2 a.m. and then, like you said, you wake up and maybe you're like, I don't know, maybe we don't do that.
Yeah, I'm impressed with people that can say, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead. I like this idea. I like it now. I'm not going to worry about the future. I'm going to put this on. Who cares? I don't have any tattoos currently, but I have friends who said, like, you know what, I'm just going to feel like I'm going to get a tattoo today. And they go out and get something of like a cactus or something on the back of their leg. And I'm like, you know what? Like, that is very cool. I respect it. It kind of inspires, a live in the moment kind of feeling. I just can't get there personally yet, at least.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like you and I, because I'm tattoo-less as well. We need to carpe diem and listen to, like the "Oh, Captain, my Captain" speech. Like, we need to be, incited in that sense.
We're gonna talk to Brian Schottenheimer about it, man. I mean, is this the first tatted up coach that the Cowboys have had? So maybe we'll take some inspiration from him.
Also, like, even talking about, not just, it's not as if his tattoo is just visible, but like mentioning it offhand, like, he is definitely cut from a different cloth. This is maybe the segue into the first thing I prepped you on. I do want to say, by the way, because you were the first person who kind of threw Brian Schottenheimer's name out. I don't want to even say his chum in the water, but you were the first one who was like, "Look, this is what I'm hearing. It's real, et cetera, et cetera." But you were also, as a side quest, the only person who gave Get Up any kind of credit for talking about Dak Prescott's legacy. You were the only one that was like, technically, this kind of was out there, so I don't fully kill them for that. So it speaks to your objectivity. That being said, maybe your answer is Schottenheimer, whatever. But first thing I prepped you on was, what do you think is the biggest thing that we, as the collective, the fan base, the analysts, the local beat, whatever you want to call it, if you had to, give the majority of our attention that was wrong to something, what was it? It would be cool if it wasn't Schottenheimer, just because that's pretty chalk, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I think one thing I'll go with, and I think it's funny because, and it better be funny, that's what we always say on our show. When the Cowboys were on the clock at 12 overall, like, I had heard Walter Nolan, and I had heard, hey, they do want a receiver next to, CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, George Pickens wasn't in the fold yet. I do think Tedero McMillan would have been the pick there. But I remember like in the, I think it was Albert Breer who first started throwing out the idea of, hey, maybe an offensive lineman. And I was like, oh man, they can't go offensive lineman again. Like they cannot go with an unsexy pick here after going offensive lineman three of the last 4 years if they do it. And then Tyler Booker gets picked, and I'm like, oh man, that is a safe, I'm not so sure about it kind of pick. They sign all these veteran offensive linemen to compete for guard. They'll piecemeal this thing together. It'll probably be okay. I think the one thing we've been wrong about is I think Tyler Booker is going to be a fantastic pick for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think one of the reasons being is just how absolutely prepared this guy is. I asked him, I was like, hey, you seem very prepared. If you go back to his opening press conference and, I asked him then about, what's your pregame routine like? Because I had heard that he likes to, get into the zone.
Oh, yeah, it's like visualization stuff, yeah.
And he went on a 5-minute, thing about giving every detail about, and every memory about things where he loves to see and take souls away. And, from the very moment this guy started talking, he's been impressive. And I think that's one thing that really sold the Cowboys during pre-draft meetings. They're like, hey, this guy is legit. This guy is everything we want. We know for a fact that this guy's going to come in and not be afraid of the moment. And I think everything so far has lived up to it. We haven't seen physical stuff yet, RJ, in terms of minicamp, right? Minicamp is more about receivers, corners, kind of installing stuff. It's not about how physical are you and how much can you withstand a bull rush from, Osa Odigizua or Micah Parsons, with a cross move or something like that. But Tyler Booker has been very impressive. And then I think the fact that he started from day one for this team, and I don't think it's ever going to stop, that's kind of further belief that, Brian Schottenheimer said right after they drafted him, this is going to be a guy we're going to start day one. So I think one thing that we maybe proved to be wrong about is, hey, the Tyler Booker pick, that's a safe pick and unsexy pick. I think it's just, it's a forcing a need after they lost Zach Martin. I think we're going to end up seeing that Tyler Booker at that point might have been the best option for them overall.
Yeah, like even when you started that, I kind of thought like it felt like, and obviously to this point have thought it was a bit of a layup, like bit of a like aim for the wide side of the green, like we're just looking to make par here. But it you kind of convinced me it is a bit of a flag planting, like it is. And I kept mentioning around the draft, I loved David Moore's question as they closed the pre-draft press conference when he asked Brian, like, hey, look, this is your first pick, like is there some I don't want to say pressure and put words in David's mouth, but some whatever that this is like a statement, that this is symbolic, that there's something to this because it's your first pick. Tyron was the first pick of the Garrett era. CD was the first pick of the McCarthy era. Like, try as you might not to, but you can trace kind of who those coaches were and what their regimes were like based on those first picks. And so to your point, not just Tyler Booker, but an Alabama guy, and not just an Alabama guy, but an overly prepared guy, an IMG guy. Like this dude has been a professional from, very, very, very early in like puberty. You know what I mean? Like that's just kind of like what his life has literally led to this moment. So I'm kind of with you. And it is strange how, like if you asked anybody to pick the sexiest thing this team has done over the offseason, they'd probably say trading for George Pickens, number one. I think Kaiir Elam has kind of grown on people. I think Jaden Blue gets some of that pop just because he's a skill position player, the local flavor, whatever. Like you have to kind of have the conversation for 5 minutes before you even get to Tyler Booker, which is strange given his pedigree and that he's the first round pick.
No doubt too. And I think with Tyler Booker too, in terms of being a potential layup, like this was a guy too, he's not an athletic dude. Like this is like in terms of being a first round grade type of talent, this is an unathletic guy. If you look at his RAS score, which, you can read as much into that as you want, this is a guy that, doesn't move very fast, isn't super explosive, but I don't think they need that with him. And I think with Tyler Booker, you're looking for a guy, especially as Dak Prescott kind of takes this next step into his career. I think, Dak talks about wanting to be mobile and stuff, but in reality, we're starting to get to the age where, hey, you got to protect him for the long run. And I think Tyler Booker is a guy that you can kind of plant that flag on, to use your point, to kind of protect Dak and maybe get this running game going. I think that's the other thing too, is clearly second year in a row, they didn't really do much in terms of addressing the running back position. Obviously got some veterans like Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, Phil Maffa, a lot of kind of we'll see factors. I think they truly kind of looked at themselves last season and said, hey, our running game was bad. And it's not because of what we had in terms of horses back there. It's in terms of the lanes that we were trying to open up on the offensive line. So they had to address it. I think the Tyler Booker pick is going to age very well.
I am prepping for this, and I haven't asked a lot of people this, but you're very special, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Although I'll allow you room to ride a fence if you, I don't want to get in trouble. last season was filled with so many like only the Cowboys things in like the worst way possible. And I don't even know what I believe. But relative to the game at San Francisco, the Rico Dowdle is suddenly sick game when Zeke Elliott's about to be a healthy scratch for the first time ever in his career with the Cowboys. Do you, again, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you at least understand, or do you at least find it understandable that people can feel, think that's a lot of BS, that there's just no way, again, not that you think this, but do you think it's understandable that people can draw the conclusion of there is no way that these coincidences just happen to happen this exact way?
Yeah, no, I think that there's totally reason from an external, standpoint to believe that, maybe something didn't quite add up there, because we saw Rico Dowdle on the field very shortly after inactives were announced. And I mean, he looked good to go. And what they kind of told us was, hey, we were racing against the clock to figure out, can we drop his temperature? And it was dropping. But by the time 90 minutes comes, hey, we got to at least get some running back we can count on for sure. And I see the external reason for kind of, not to believe that. I also do see the internal thing, because we've seen a couple times now where, Mike McCarthy talked to us about this last year, where he's had players, I believe Zach Martin, this happened to him on the road against Miami in 2023, where, hey, this guy is good to go. We think he's good to go. He's pushing for it. We believe in him. And then the 90-minute passes, all right, we're going to make him active. And then 45 minutes comes and it's like, oh, actually, he can't go.
Right.
So now you just lost a roster spot, right? And obviously that's why you have some room there. But, I think a lot of guys, like, and specifically with Mike McCarthy, they might rely on the safe pick. And it said, hey, we're not sure if Rico's temperature is going to come down, do this. But when you add the context of what you said about Zeke, there's fully reason for external disbelief in terms of why that happened.
Yeah, I think conspiracy theory might be the best like blanket to throw on that take. But it, again, one of like, there could be a book about like how toxic and crazy and whatever last season was. But it weirdly got worse. I would offer in the first 2 weeks of the offseason, what with the delay on moving on from McCarthy and then the way the Schottenheimer thing evolved. I mentioned at the top, you were one of the first people who was like, look, this is like it did not catch you by surprise. It really took off nationally. I talked about this with Sean Sharif, what will be last week for the audience, when the betting markets had him as the favorite. That's when everybody was like, whoa, where did this come from? And that's when you jumped in. You were like, look, I heard this, etc., XYZ. For whatever reason, maybe we're all just this desperate. People have come around. I don't want to, minimize what he's done. He's spoken very well. He's done a great job at this point. So all kudos and attaboys for Brian. But what was the first moment, if it's happened, maybe it hasn't, where you thought, okay, like this might legitimately work? Like, again, I don't mean to sound foolish, but he might be the guy. He might be the one who does it. And it may be for reasons that aren't necessarily him. It may be Dak or Tyler Booker or whatever. But what was the first moment? It could have been something he said, his tattoo, his visor talk, Steve Spurrier, whatever. Like, when did that moment begin to click for you?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it. Before I answer, I'm just going to rehash a little bit of just, the Brian Schottenheimer hiring experience. The day Mike McCarthy in the Cowboys split, I called one source who told me, all right, here's the three guys they're going to go after. It was Kellen Moore, it was Robert Saleh, and it was Brian Schottenheimer. And I said, Brian Schottenheimer to be like OC QB coach with Robert Saleh? And they're like, no, head coach. And it's funny because, to your point, I was skeptical. So I think one thing you do as reporters too is you understand you're cynical with yourself, right? You got to be like a lawyer. And you're like, if I throw out right now that Brian Schottenheimer is a head coach candidate, like, yeah, I mean, if I do it day one, it could be a could boom bust thing. But I mean, there's a lot of chance for that not to go right. Clearly, obviously, it ended up being a thing and worked out. But I think what that tells you is the Cowboys were narrowed in from the very beginning on that trio, and then kind of specifically, I think Brian Schottenheimer. And I think one thing, no matter how Brian Schottenheimer does the rest of the way, I wrote this the day they hired him, hold off your judgment on Brian Schottenheimer, but judge the heck out of the process. And it was not good.
Right.
They didn't do their due diligence, I think, personally, in terms of examining the entire field, of talking to a bunch of people. You look at what the Jets did, you look at what the Bears did. Bears ended with Ben Johnson, right? But they ended up talking to a bunch of people in order to really solidify that thought. But in terms of
the Cowboys couldn't even talk to Ben Johnson because they waited on McCarthy. You couldn't talk to the Lions or Chiefs coordinators.
100%. So that's part of the
right.
process too, which is a great point. But objectively, when I first started So I started covering the team 2023. That was my first year. And every Monday after games, we talked to McCarthy, we talked to the OC, the DC, and the special teams coach, right? And this was Schottenheimer's first year as OC. And I remember, like, I've been watching the NFL for a long time. I knew Schottenheimer was, kind of had the rise and then the fall and Seattle to let Russ cook. So when he was there, I was like, oh, let's kind of hear him talk. And being the son of Marty Schottenheimer, RJ, I'm not kidding. The first moment from the first press conference I heard him talk, I'm like, that guy's a future head coach. I he just talked like it. And, I think that's one thing we've seen now is he's getting a lot of people to buy in because of his press conferences. And I think the way you do that is you're genuine and you're real. And I do believe that what Brian Schottenheimer is doing is genuine. All these beliefs, this care, I believe that, to the full extent. I also think there's a reason why he hadn't become a head coach yet. And I do think that I've seen a lot of head coaches who talk well that don't end up being great coaches. And I've seen great coaches that are not great in press conferences, but are fantastic coaches. So to be honest, though, the first time I heard him talk, I said, I think this guy's eventually going to get a head coaching chance because he's genuine, he's real, and he's insightful.
I think it sounds like such fluff to be like, oh, the way and like, to be fair, what else can you judge him on in June? You know what I mean? Of his first season. So like, I mean, there's some necessary context, but I'm with you. If I had to narrow on your answer, like as I'm mining through it myself, my favorite thing about him is that he has stood on or kind of made it a point to say, like, I'm Brian Schottenheimer, and not in a like I'm running from my dad's legacy. He's spoken glowingly of his father, and the words he said ahead of Father's Day were very beautiful. But like, he's mentioned Steve Spurrier and Pete Carroll more than his father from a football standpoint, from an influence standpoint, and that's cool. Like that makes sense. You know what I mean? That he's trying to carve his own path. Like he's a really easy guy to root for. And people talk so much about nepotism in the NFL. Like that's strange. Like I feel like that it's rare to get somebody who is a legacy that has this, incredible momentum this way. Most people feel like, oh, whatever, like whether it's a Kubiak or a Zimmer or whatever, they feel like, oh, they're just getting this opportunity because of their father. And I don't mean to say that, but people are kind of invested in this now. It's a weird. My wife and I started watching The Pit on Max. Have you heard of this show?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but I need to get on it.
It's got the guy from ER. Noah, I think his name's Noah Wiley, and he plays like a doctor. And it's like, I've seen this before. I've seen the guy be like the doctor and the cheesy lines or whatever. But I'm in. Like I'm hooked. And like even though like I've seen this exact thing before with this exact dude, I'm kind of in. So Brian Schottenheimer is kind of the Noah Wiley of football, in my opinion.
I like that comp. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head too when you talk about Spurrier and specifically Pete Carroll. Like go watch a Raiders Pete Carroll practice. Right. Go watch like the beginning. And they do very similar things. Like I think I'd argue that his biggest inspiration is Pete Carroll, which I find fascinating. And, that's honestly in terms of who's been more of an influential person more recently, it has been Pete Carroll probably. So I think with Brian Schottenheimer, the jury's still out until we actually see games, until we see his culture, handle adversity and can it, stand true through that. But for now, I think he's doing everything he can to ace the test.
Very collegiate coach in vibes, like Pete Carroll feels, that's what everybody said, obviously, when he jumped to the Seahawks after some people say jump, some people say ran from USC. I know you're a West Coast guy, so, whatever. One of my favorite things that Mike ever said was right after your first season in 23, that first press conference after the Packers loss. And I don't recall who asked him about the shadow that the team lived in. And he said, look, we take full responsibility for what we have been a part of, but we do not take responsibility for everything, relative to McCarthy prior to 2020. And I loved that. I loved the conviction of like, look, this shadow was born because of these dudes upstairs. Like we don't fault McCarthy for what Garrett failed to do, or Romo or DeMarcus Ware or Des Bryant, all these people we love because they all have been a part of it. That being said, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, it will have been 30 years. And Brian Schottenheimer, Dak Prescott, they will be the people on the graphics that get, blown out or whatever in January of 2026. That's a heavy thing. And I mean, they seem pretty used to it and accustomed to it. He obviously talked about kind of embracing the past and connecting to it and, whatever. I don't know. Do you think if they don't win the Super Bowl this year that it will be a different intensity, or do you think we've already reached critical mass and we just live here at this point?
No, I think that there's almost kind of a toleration or like just a feeling of this being the new standard. I'd argue. You
Right.
know, I mean, like obviously you want to win Super Bowls, and I think that's what they, are trying to do. But like you watch what they do in the offseason and you see that hey, they could do more, right?
Right.
You look at the Micah Parsons contract situation and you think, hey, if you would have got this done earlier, then you can have more room to make moves. And then you can also start working on Tyler Smith to get that done earlier.
Deron
You could have
Bland,
some
George
restitution
Pickens,
on Ron Bland.
Brandon
Yeah,
Aubrey. Yeah.
100%. So like, I think in terms of, hey, this is now going to be 30 years. I don't think it's almost like when you turn 30, right? Like it's like, oh
Yeah.
shoot, 30 is going to feel differently, right? And instead of 29, and you wake up when you're 30, and you're like, oh, this is the same exact feeling. So I
Wow, what
think
a comp. Yeah.
I think the standard has changed a little bit, and I think that it kind of is what it is. It's America's team, and you're always going to feel that pressure. You're going to be on a lot of primetime games, which means you're going to have to answer a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of TV talk about you, and I just don't think that there's anything that different. It's kind of funny for me personally, like. When I first got into being in 2023, I remember like in press conferences, it's in a big glass room inside the Star, right when you walk in, and people are kind of walking by looking at you. And I remember thinking like, man, this is kind of wild. This is weird, And obviously Dalton Schultz and other,
Right.
Cowboys players have talked about this. Now there could be 150, 200 people out there. Doesn't really change. The only thing that's ever caught my eye is like there was like prom pictures one night during a press conference, and I was like, what is that? Who got that access? So that's like you kind of become used to it, I think, RJ. Truly.
Yeah, I think there is something to like we're all like Bane. Like we were born in the darkness. Like if you're a 30-year-old, or like whatever, if you're approximately 30 years old, 35, 25, like if you're in this kind of range, this is all you know. And it is strange. And so I've been wondering that, like if the anniversary of it, it's a different thing to say like 30 years right now, because technically they could do it. Like technically they could win the Super Bowl this year and, fight that off. But I mean, at the time of Super Bowl 30, they had won 5 of them and had been in 8. And so I do think there is like a different, just underscore of like now it's been 30. It does sound different. You're right. It doesn't feel different than 29. And so I'm anxious to see what that will look like if it ultimately does hit. But I think your comparison of like we'll all wake up the moment the season ends, whatever it is, it'll be like it's officially been 30 years. And like, I'll be honest, like my tweet with that will like blow up and it will be hilarious. And people will be like, whatever. But then the very next morning, it'll be like nothing really changed. It'll just be like, oh, and I think some of it is like they do find new ways to lose, but it's like they've already like done everything. They've hurt everyone in the deepest possible way. So it's like, oh, now it's just been 30 years. Like, so what? What else can you do to me type thing?
Yeah, I have a friend who gets anxiety before they go into their meetings with their bosses, right? And I told them like, hey, they can't hurt you anymore. They've already said already said these mean things to you. They've already told you things like this. You've already experienced the worst. They can't hurt you anymore. And I think for the Cowboys, to your point, there might be some of that in terms of chasing the Super Bowl and not getting there, and the feeling of, hey, why didn't you do more? Well, now that's been a couple of years over and over again. I think, to be honest with you, the bigger feeling was when the Commanders went to the NFC Championship last year, and it's like, oh wait, now the Cowboys are the longest drought in the NFC. Like even the Commanders, and especially when you look at what happened with the Commanders, they changed a lot of things, right? They changed the way, obviously,
they changed ownership. That's the elephant in the room is they change ownership and everything good happens.
Yeah, they change the way they do business. They get a new head coach. They get the number 2 overall pick, get a fantastic starting quarterback, make a lot of moves in free agency, and voila, they're in the NFC Championship. So I think that those things make the Cowboys' current situation feel worse than it will be when the season ends this coming year.
Voila isn't in my standard lexicon, and I think it needs to be. It's underused. So good for you, Joe. Last one, and you kind of brought this up when we were chatting. I don't say I disagree with you because I like you a lot and I don't want to be confrontational.
You can disagree,
and you certainly know more than I do here. But you said that the Micah thing, that your exact wording here was why this thing is unique. His urgency and maybe you just mean that he wants to practice. And that Jones is getting maybe your take on uniqueness is that Micah will talk about it and be I don't say loud, but it does feel very reminiscent of Des Bryant. in 2015. He would practice a little bit, and he wouldn't even wear like the practice gear. Like he would just be out there in like street clothes and stuff. And it did get done before the franchise tag deadline, but that's the closest comp I have. So I don't know, and for all we know, it could happen between now and the day this video drops, which would make this really funny. That being said, why is the Micah thing, the extension, whatever you want to call it, unique in your estimation?
Yeah, I think it's unique because I think that Micah from the very beginning has had a clear philosophy to not play the Joneses game, to not play the part of the angry, money hungry,
Right.
former first round pick that wants to get paid. And, I think the Cowboys, if you look at at least since 2023, since I've been covering the team, and, before that too, you look at Dak Prescott the first time,
Right.
like the Cowboys have been able to at least play the part of, hey, the reason why this is taking so long is because there's a disagreement in money. You look at CeeDee Lamb and it's like, hey, agents talk, right? So that leave with Justin Jefferson needs to fall and Jamar
Right.
Chase, a couple other guys before we can come to an agreement. I think this is the first time where Micah from the very beginning is like, oh no, I don't even need to be the highest paid, non-quarterback in the NFL. I just need a lake house. I just want to go out there and play. I just want to do things. And, I was talking with someone else here too, and they said that like Micah's a guy that also likes to put things on for show too. And he kind of understands the importance of that. So, yeah, when he goes out there and does limited work and drills, it kind of shows a commitment to, hey, I want to be here. Right. I mean, the fact that he even showed up is unique compared to what some other guys across the league are doing in terms of their contract negotiations. And I think for the first time, we're seeing the Joneses, at least since I've started covering, we're seeing at least Stephen Jones get a little irritated on the current situation. I mean, he did not want to talk Micah at all. Normally, and I think Jerry would talk about it. He'd have no problem doing it. He has talked about it. But Steven was, after that OTA practice was very like, I do not want to talk about Micah specifically. And I think that is a little bit unique. I think that right now the Joneses understand that in terms of the narrative language, I think Micah Parsons might have as much of an advantage than any other player has had in recent history. Like if you go back even to Dak showed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Dak was also kind of following with them too a little bit like, oh, hey, like, I don't have to finish my career here. Like I can go somewhere else. I know if I hit the market, I'm going to get paid. And I think from the very beginning, Micah and David Mulugeta, even if Jerry doesn't know his name, they've had a clear thought and philosophy on how to kind of handle the narrative of waiting to get this deal done, because I think they know ultimately what the Joneses are going to do. They're going to give them what they want.
I think that's well said. I think working for Micah is that this has happened so much, and like the national narrative has caught on to the silly little games that the front office plays. I've said this forever now. At the Super Bowl in Miami, following the 2019 season, the first one the Chiefs won, Dak did the car wash and said, I'm paraphrasing again, but I might hold out. I might not show up to minicamp and OTAs, and then COVID hit, and so he didn't. I don't want to say get a chance. Like it was a horrible thing, obviously, but we didn't get to that point where he ultimately did or didn't do that. And so, because it was all virtual, so the timing kind of, I don't want to say again, misplayed his hand or played his hand for him, but we just didn't get to see that. He might have done it otherwise. And so Micah, to your point, I also, now I agree with you. So I've come all the way around. He is not only not playing the part that they have casted Dak and CeeDee in before, but he's also not playing what we have defined to be the foil. Because so many people would say like, well, hold out, because that's the way you should do it. He's like, no, I'm gonna do this my way, and it's working for him. So it is inevitable, which is why it's so stupid. But okay, good job. You sold me, Joe. Well done. All right. Anything you want to say before you get out of here? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Summer plans. Maybe you have a rec to stream if it isn't the pit, obviously.
Oh, in terms of streaming, like, have you ever heard of Dropout? The channel Dropout?
No.
Okay, so it's this like kind of, I think it's old college humor stuff that they've now turned into a whole
like
streaming channel
type stuff.
It's not that, but anyways, they have a bunch of game shows and improv stuff and very funny. There's a show called Game Changer where they have 3 panelists and they change the game every single episode. It's fascinating. So anyways, if you have time, want to kill something, have some fun.
What a wreck. This was good. Like most people would be like, Succession, but not Joe Hoyt, people. Not Joe Hoyt. Wow.
Yeah, me and my wife have been all about it. And I think just moving forward, one thing, the Micah, when will he sign, will be very fascinating. I think it doesn't happen until midweek through second week of training camp, first week of training camp, something once we get to Oxnard. That's kind of my belief, but also who knows. So
I asked Skywalker Steel this. I said that the thing I always look forward to, and I don't watch a second of it, but is the Little League World Series, because the Little League World Series is the truest, like, football's almost here thing. Like, NBA finals are great, but you still got to go a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, but when the Little League World Series hits, like, we are so close. The Little League World Series begins on August 13th. So Micah signs, you think, before the first pitch, you're saying?
I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'll say he gets signed before. That's my prediction. That's just. But who knows? Truly, who knows?
You traveling anywhere before training camp?
Not.
I don't want to dox you. Like, don't say like your Airbnb address or anything. But
No, I went camping in Oregon last weekend, and then I did a golf trip in May. So like I'm traveled out. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to get to Oxnard.
Well done, Joe Hoyt. The last word belongs to you.
Well, first off, RJ, you're the man. Blogging the Boys is a great job, and ever since I worked at Lone Star, and you guys have been so nice to help amplify my stuff, and I'm just very appreciative. And keep up the good work, dude. Follow me at Joe J Hoyt on Twitter, and check out DLLS Sports every day.
We'll put Joe's links down in the description below. Joe's links a lot easier to say than DLLS. I did it though, so shout out me.